was involved in a couple of different corporate settings where we were looking at lots and lots of new ideas and having to use a very quick process of figuring out whether they're going to make money or they're not going to make money, where to invest our effort. And also how those evolve over time is another really important part of it. We're talking now, you've got a concept, you think you've got an idea for a product or for a service that you could turn into a business. The first thing is to figure out, is there somebody else that's got this idea ahead of me? About a year ago, I had this great idea for tidal power that I thought was super original, and after a little bit of searching, I found out some guy in Australia had patented exactly that. And had spent lots of money trying to turn it into a business and been totally unsuccessful. But he also had done all the work of figuring out the math as to whether this was going to work or not, and I was very quickly able to figure out that it wasn't going to work in British Columbia and move on to my next idea. But if somebody else is doing it, you need to look at who they are, think about how they're positioned geographically. If it's Google that's doing it, it's probably really different than if it's a guy like you in Belgium that's doing it. If it's a technical-based idea, you've got to make sure it's actually viable. Maybe you've already got the capability of doing that yourself, but it's probably a good idea to test it on some friends or find someone that is stronger on the parts of the technology you're the weakest on, and just make sure that there's a proof of concept there. Often you can do some sort of quick demonstration to figure out what the hardest part is. When you're working on the technical part, the key thing to do is to look for the things that can kill it. Right? You got to look for things that can stop your business completely. Like, if this doesn't work, I'm screwed. It's not going to work. And that's the part you got to eliminate. Once you've got that innovative part, you need to think about patenting. So the key thing in patenting, there's two key pieces. One is it actually inventive? And the second part is, did somebody think of it before me? The inventive part, don't belabor too much. Err on the side of assuming it is inventive. As the person that thought of the idea, it's going to be way more obvious to you than to anybody else. In my experience, like working with lots of technical teams, 90% of the time people don't think they have a patent when they do. If you do think you have a patent, it only costs $105 to protect it at the very earliest stage. So there's a thing called a provisional patent. Provisional patent is just you write down, or you can hire someone to help you if you want. It's maybe a good idea, but you can certainly do it yourself. Everything there is that you know about your invention, like pages and pages of it. You can even photocopy your lab book and throw it in. The idea of a provisional patent is you're basically just claiming dibs. You're saying, hey, I had this idea on this day. And then you have a year to turn it into an actual patent application. And you can claim priority back to the date you put your provisional in. And you're allowed to take any of the ideas and content and data you had in your provisional patent, and then spend lots of money with a sophisticated lawyer to turn that into a Loctite patent, which might cost you $10,000 or something. Patents go by country. So if you really want to protect yourself around the world, you got to file in every country. There's some patent treaties that make it easy to do that, so you can put one filing and then choose which countries you want. Nobody ever actually files in every country because it's incredibly expensive and it's stupid. All you need to do is protect either the market you're going to be in. So if you thought you had a product was only going to appeal to Canadians, or was totally only suitable for people who lived in BC, then you only need a Canadian patent. But probably you want to sell your product around the world if you're going to be paying $10,000 to patent it. So the US is definitely the #1 place you want to patent. And by blocking the US, you do a good job of blocking other entrants right away, because they'd then only be able to sell in Europe or something. And once you filed in the US, you have 1 more year to make filings in other places. And they will backdate to the date on the US application. So for provisional, you actually have 2 years in the other jurisdictions. The concept of a patent is the government's going to give you a monopoly for, I think it's 20 years now. What you have to give the world in return for getting that monopoly is you have to tell them your idea. Your other choice is to keep it as a trade secret. Sometimes it's a way better choice. So let's say you had an idea about how to double the efficiency of a pulp and paper plant by tweaking something way hidden off in some process. People could be infringing that all over the world and you'd have no way of knowing, right? Now, if your idea was to add a chemical into the process and you could then detect ppms of that chemical in the paper and say, okay, that guy's got my process, then you want to patent it. So in the first case, there's no way to spot that somebody's infringing. You're probably way better to keep it as a trade secret. In the second case, you're probably way better. So Creo, people know the company Creo, one of the most successful technology companies in Vancouver, in BC. It grew from a startup, couple people to 5,000 people worldwide, and it got sold to Kodak for $1 billion. So their key idea was a really sophisticated laser head. And they could have patented that, but the problem is, then they would have told everybody else how to do it. And it was such an incredibly inventive idea, and it was so obscure, and it could be hidden so well, that they kept it as a trade secret. Creo never patented that, and nobody ever figured out how it worked. So if you're going to patent it, you have to keep it secret until the patent issues. That means you can't go to a trade show. That means you can't sell your product until you've done the filing. And again, a provisional helps there. As soon as you got a provisional patent, as soon as you filed that piece of paper and mailed it to the post office and got your receipt back, you're then patent pending. You know, it says patent pending on stuff. That's all it means. Some guy wrote up a bunch of stuff and mailed it to the patent office. Do it in the other order. If you go to a trade show and you show everybody your product, and then you file a provisional or you file a real patent, and a competitor finds out about that, he can invalidate your patent. Also really important to make sure you figure out who the inventors are. You can't have people listed who weren't inventors, that didn't contribute to the core ideas, and you can't be missing someone. Either of those will invalidate. Patent, you got to find the whole literature out there, from university professors to whatever, that may have revealed your core ideas before. And the best way to do that is, again, Google actually, but there's another Google application called Google Patent, which they don't publicize too much, but if you Google Patent, you can find it. And it's great, and it has a database of most of the US patents that you can search Google-like. When you have an idea that you've got with other people, or you start interacting with other people and they add on to your idea, you really need to be clear and clean up front as to who owns the ideas coming out here. All kinds of stuff can happen. And then you're stuck because you can't do anything with that idea because it's half yours and half his.